for the Douglas County Commission for October 26th. We had not intended to be all on Zoom today, but we've had some events at the Douglas County Courthouse. And so thank you all for joining us here on Zoom and figuring this out as we go. I believe Sarah is in the rotunda of the Douglas County Courthouse. And Sarah, I know there's a few people online. You want to just give us an update of what happened before we jump into our work session? And so after you do that, I'll give sort of the start of the work session.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Kelly. So this morning, there was during the testing of the fire suppression system and the fire alarm system, a sprinkler was turned on, and Jimmy might have a more technical term, but basically we had a significant amount of water coming from the top of the courthouse down through the southwest corner of the building. So that would be the attic, the county commission chambers, and the treasurer's office, and then into the basement, into the appraiser's office. Behind me in the county commission chambers, I believe there are about 60 fans running at this point in time to try to dry everything out. And I'm going to be here in the rotunda, so that because according to the Kansas Open Meetings Act, we need to provide a location for the public to attend and listen to the meeting. So they can join me here in the rotunda if they want to listen to the meeting or to provide public comment during the regular business meeting. Just as a reminder for those listening, work sessions do not have public comments and no decisions are made today. They'll be brought back before a future commission meeting.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Jimmy, and everybody over there at the county courthouse for making the best of a difficult situation. And thanks all for those who come online here and joined us today. With that, we'll start our work session. I see Commissioner Willie's here. Thank you. Commissioner Reed is gone today. And so I'll turn it back over to Sarah to sort of kick us off on our capital improvement projects work session.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I'm really excited about this meeting. The work of our 5-year capital improvement plan is a significant amount of work for a number of staff that are on this call. As commissioners know, because of the federal ARPA process, we delayed our normal preparation of the capital improvement plan, which normally happens during our regular operating budget in the summer. We delayed it till fall so that we could manage that ARPA process in the spring, and we could do this fall. So at this point in time, I want to introduce Chad Voigt, our Director of Public Works, is on this call. Jimmy Wilkins, our Director of Buildings and Grounds. Jay Zimmershed, our Capital Projects Manager. Brooke Sowers, our Finance Manager. And I'm going to turn this over to Brooke to kick us off. But I think at different points in time in the conversation, everyone's going to chip in. And we've got some others in the waiting room that can provide comment if needed as well. So Brooke.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, commissioners. Can everyone see my screen and hear me okay? Great. Commissioners, I wanted to take a brief moment, and I really do want to keep this presentation brief to allow for ample time for public works staff to go over their projects too. But I wanted to provide an overview of how the capital improvement program, how we typically allocate the funds throughout this process and eventually make funds available for upcoming projects. So I've just got a few slides prepared, and I'll be available for questions after that. And then we'll go into some more project detail. The CIP, here, let me get there. There we go. Okay. The capital improvement planning, it's funded through that one budgeted line item in the general fund. So the way that we have structured this capital improvement program over the years is that Public Works shares a pool of that funding, and then Facilities shares a pool of that funding. So as you can see on this pie chart in front of you, that the Facilities side has about almost $20 million available. And then the road and bridge project balances is about $13.7 million, $13.8 million. So you add those two together, and that is the fund balance available in the capital improvement program. And I use the fund balances for the beginning of the year, so 2022. We have spent a significant portion of this funding on the facilities side this year, looking towards about $4 million or more in expenditures before the end of the year, with some of the projects that we're currently working on. So just diving a little bit deeper into that split and that allocation and the separate pools of funding, 70% of those budgeted funds each year are allocated to support road and bridge projects. And then 30% of that budgeted line item in the general fund is allocated to support facilities projects. Road and bridge and facilities project, they're completely tracked and accounted for separately. It's almost like it's two miniature funds inside of this one fund. Additional revenue is realized in the capital improvement plan fund, specifically lease revenue that we get for some property that we own that we lease out. And then we also realize some interest that is earned in that fund as well. CIP project balances, I think these two charts are a really good representation of periods of saving and spending and just general flow of capital improvement program in itself. So on the facility side, you can see that we save up a lot of money and then big projects happen and then that money gets spent and almost down to nothing there in 2017. I think at that time our balance for the beginning of the year was like $1.4 million. And so right now we're in a period of saving because we have a lot of really big projects that we're going to go over here in the next half hour. I'm going to leave some time for Chad. And then road and bridge projects, you can see that long-term savings can be observed in that pool of funding. So I think these graphs are really representative of how those trends look. Something that's a little bit new this year, a little bit different way of doing our capital improvement program, if adopted. The capital improvement program, this can be for land acquisition, new construction, remodeling, additions, software, really projects that are increasing value of existing structures. These are typically projects that are over maybe $1 million. There might be some crossover there depending on what needs to be replaced or repaired. But that's the general idea of a capital improvement program project. What is going to be new in 2023, if this plan is adopted, is a capital replacement program. So the capital replacement projects, they can include replacement or repair. One of the projects most recently that comes to mind that really would have fit well in this particular bucket would have been the elevator at the courthouse here. So that would be a project that restores value to an existing structure. So right now you might look at the list and you say, well, this probably fit better in CRP. Chances are that project may have been added or expressed to us prior to kind of looking at a new philosophy for CIP. So that is what we can kind of look towards moving ahead. As we were looking at the CIP this year, there were a couple of projects that we've had the projects in the CIP for a couple of years, and at least for the past year, they've sat idle. The Douglas County Correctional Facility Space Reallocation Project, that project we were able to determine was well outside of the scope of our capital improvement program. It looks like that project may cost upwards of around $18 million to complete. So in the proposed CIP, you will see a redistribution of funds to both projects in the CIP and the CRP. And so that is one of the projects that has provided a significant influx of funding available for other projects should we reallocate that funding.
And Brooke, if I can interject there a little bit, and I know Sheriff Armbruster is also available if there are questions later by the commission. Yeah, I think this is a, we haven't closed the loop on this conversation with the county commission yet in terms of what the initial kind of work the sheriff's office did with Trainer Architects to sort of determine what some reuse of space would cost. But as Brooke puts it here, she's about right. Some of that is related to just the current cost of construction, and some of it is related to, working in a secure facility that's pretty expensive to work in. So at this point in time, we're not saying, I think it's important to acknowledge that work at the correctional facility will need to be done at some point in time in the future. But at this point in time, we don't have a good number for it. So it's being placed in the program in the plan accordingly. And we'd be glad to answer questions on that if the commission has them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Another project that we have been saving a pretty significant amount of funds for is the Downtown Space Needs Project. We had completed a space needs study in 2019, and that study identified improvements to our downtown campus here. So what you'll see in the recommended or proposed rather CIP projects is basically taking that money that we've saved for that downtown space needs projects and splitting it up and then reallocating it to specific projects that were identified in that study. So you'll see in what is prepared, those projects kind of broken down, and we'll get a little bit more into that on the next page here. I talked a little bit about the space reallocation project at the jail. So proposed projects that could be funded with the majority of those reallocated funds are all listed there. There's a few projects there that have an asterisk that are not included in the summary document that I have prepared for this work session today, but it's something to think about. I know that Jamie Shu, County Clerk, is potentially needing some precinct scanners, and I would just have to confirm that with him for 2023. So that would be something that we could potentially consider, but then also all of those projects listed there, and then emergency communication hardware needs. This software, the technology, it ages out so quickly that forward thinking, 5 years, 10 years ahead, these are the types of things that you may see in the CIP. Moving back to the downtown space needs project, I've kind of broken out what was allocated to that project into its individual and specific projects. So this would be courthouse second floor and BOCC hearing room remodel, and then a third floor common spaces remodel, and then basement remodel, electrical panel upgrade. So we've learned today that we are blowing breakers when we have 20 fans plugged in the commission hearing room. So things like that will be included in that upgrade. And then the teal colored box there, that is for the JLE master plan revision and expansion. And I just want to note that project only includes, professional services and construction documents. That expansion will cost well beyond, what the scope of a project in our CIP would typically cover. So this would be just that initial phase of that. Additional consideration could be made for the property down the street at 1242 Massachusetts Street. We do have some required maintenance projects that are included in this proposed CIP to keep the structure a structure. There are some real structural integrity issues happening right now that need to be addressed. So I think that's it for that presentation. If I may, I'm gonna pull up the individual project pages, and I just want to quickly walk the commission through these pages, being mindful of time, because I want to share with our colleagues over at Public Works. So bear with me here. Sorry, guys, I closed it. Okay. Almost there. Thank you for your patience. Okay. All right. So this is very, very small. I'm not going to get into the summary a whole lot. So everything that is on this page is on the individual project pages. And so I'm going to just go through that. This table here is an allocation summary, and it is by year, it's expected expenditures. And then it shows all of the project allocations out by year, also including 2022. So we're also looking at what we did this year too. I'm going to try and make this just a little bit bigger for everybody. Is that good? Okay. So this first project, this is a long running project. I think it started in 2017. This is our yearly payment on the bond issue for the fire station at 745 Kentucky Street. I may have gotten that address wrong, but we typically will pay about $100,000 a year. As of 2022, approximately $1.04 million in debt remains as the county's portion of that, and it is scheduled to be exhausted in 2029. So that debt will be relieved, and we can free up an additional $100,000 each year for that. There is no allocation in 2023. That is because a few years back, there was an extra $100,000 on there, and just in case we were able to pay that off early, the thought was that we could just save that and set it aside, but we'll just have to keep paying the payments each year. The next project, this is that reallocated project. So I indicate here which projects they were reallocated to. We saw that in that chart that I broke down on the presentation slide. And then the courthouse stonework restoration. This project is slated to be completed in 2023. So work has already begun. This is the basement waterproofing and also the above grade restoration to the courthouse stonework. So once we really get that waterproofed on the exterior for the above grade, we can really focus in on getting some of the common spaces inside the courthouse and offices renovated, since we won't have water coming in. The next project, this is the Fairgrounds Improvement Project. Maintenance staff has made significant headway on getting some contractors out to the fairgrounds to make improvements to that property. They're just now completing the roofing project at building. No, that's the pavilion. No, it's not. I'm sorry. I'm messing this up. I know what building. Community build. Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate you chiming in there. So that work is underway right now, and it should be complete by the end of the year. The deferred maintenance project, you can see here in 2022 where that oh, I'm sorry, this is deferred maintenance. So this project is slated to be completed by the end of the year And this is replacement of quite a bit of mechanical components at the jail that were aging and needed to be replaced. The Douglas County Correctional Facility Space Reallocation Project. This is the project that we did, in fact, in the proposed CIP, reallocate to other CIP or CRP projects. As I do want to note that out years in 2027 and 2028, we are going to be the proposed is to put some additional money towards that so that we can start looking at that project again. The first floor clerk's office remodel, this project is slated to be completed by the end of the year. Originally, when we had looked at this project, the project was split between an equipment reserve fund and the capital improvement fund. I just want to point out that in 2023, with the additional funding that is available through reallocation of funds through those other projects, I did include the other half to reimburse that equipment reserve fund in 2023. So I just want to point that out because that is a little bit different than what was originally brought to the commission when we talked about this project. The second floor, third floor remodel here at the courthouse. So this original picture of the courthouse here, or I'm sorry, the commission meeting room rather, you know, we are going to be looking to remodel the second floor, the administration spaces. And with that, it could include a pretty significant remodel of the commission meeting room. You know, additional consideration should be made if we do move to a 5-member commission. That will have to happen in 2023. And the second floor hearing room in the JLE, this is a project that was approved this year and work is getting ready to start. I don't know if we'll pay any out this year, so I put the remaining payout for that project next year. JLE master plan revision and expansion. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because I think I covered it pretty well in the presentation that we went over earlier. But if commission has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer that. The courthouse elevator repair, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. That was pretty recent, so we know where that project stands. Courthouse third floor remodel of the common spaces. So this is going to be the Register of Deeds office and then just general common spaces, hallways, bathrooms, repairing some of the paint and plaster where water is coming in on the west side and the north side. Courthouse basement remodel and electrical upgrade. We talked a little bit about this, but again, looking at the walls downstairs, once we get that basement waterproofed, it is going to be really important to make sure that we get in there, we repair those walls and paint them and get them up to how they should be. Public Works HVAC replacement. This is a project that needs to be completed. I would defer to my colleagues that have a little more technical knowledge than I do if commission has specific questions about this project. But the existing HVAC system at Public Works is in need of replacement. Fairgrounds maintenance staff also needs a building, new shop for the fairgrounds and equipment and staff offices as well. The illustration there depicts how that building would be set up, and these funds are allocated in 2023 with project beginning in 2024 and 2025 in the proposed CIP. 1242 Massachusetts improvements. I did speak a little bit about this, so I won't spend a lot of time here. But this project could be ongoing for a number of years as we repair what needs repaired now, and then also moving forward into either renovating that building for office space and making those improvements there at that location. HVAC replacement for the elections office. The HVAC unit does need to be replaced there. It's aged and it is, it could potentially fail. And I would defer to any of my colleagues that have more technical knowledge of that to answer questions. HVAC upgrades to youth services building. So this is the building at 330 Northeast Industrial Lane. This project is slated for 2024 and is in need of upgrade. HVAC upgrades to the JLE and historic courthouse. This project is slated for 2024. General contingency is available for both CIP and CRP. These funds are available for, things that come up throughout the year. I know we've had a couple of things this year, the elevator, the first floor remodel. We'd like to have sufficient funds available for those projects that come up that are really unanticipated, and that we have funding available to get things done and get things done quickly, should the need arise. The fairgrounds parking lots are crumbling and need improvement. These projects are slated for 2024 and 2025 with allocations in 3 years beginning in 2023. Fairgrounds building replacement. This is slated for work to begin in 2024. Human Services building, our building over off of Ridge Court is in need of a parking lot replacement. The parking lot you can see here in the pictures are crumbling and need repair. That project is slated for 2024. The Human Services building HVAC also is in need of replacement. The project is allocated in 2023, but I have the project set to be completed in 2025. Human Services electrical upgrades, similarly to the courthouse basement and electrical upgrade. We would like to propose that project for that building in 2023 for the allocation, but then work to commence and be completed in 2025. And the Justice and Law Enforcement Center is in need of elevator upgrade. Similarly to the courthouse, it's aging, and we just want to get a leg up on that before any failure. Human Services elevator upgrade, again, the same thing. This project is slated and allocated in 2025 in your proposed CIP. We want to get this down now as a project that needs to be done. And then we have an HVAC replacement at the Fairgrounds Building 2021 project is allocated and slated to begin in 2024. Going back to youth services north, the parking lot is in need of replacement there. That project is allocated and slated for 2025. Finally, like the capital improvement program allocation, there's also a contingency allocation for the capital repair program. This is vital. When projects arise, a need arises, then we have funding available as we approach commission about those issues that come up throughout the year that we haven't planned for. That is all I have as the facilities side of the presentation. Chad, I'm right at 4:29. So if commissioners have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now or at the end if Chad wants to begin too. It's up to you guys.
Why don't we pause for questions here on these first set of projects? I have a couple questions, but I want to open it up to Commissioner Willie first.
Well, you may have noticed I had some technical difficulties. I've been here the whole time, just maybe not visually. I've swapped to another computer from IT. I do have quite a few questions actually, and I had been looking for a time to sit down with Brooke to explore some of those in more depth, which I think would be not within this meeting, but some of a one-on-one, and give us a little time before we have this to vote on. Just kind of the first obvious question is the water damage that we're experiencing today in the courthouse. Does this change? I mean, it's too early to know, but is this likely to change some of the aspects of the CIP process?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, you know, I've never really experienced anything like this. But there are going to be insurance claims, and there are, you know, there's going to be a lot of moving parts. And one of the things that I had talked to one of my colleagues about today is just making sure that when we're, you know, we have to get a new projector. The projector was completely lost. When we're replacing some of these things and working with insurance, how are we making sure that we're getting the things that we would have gotten and looked at when we did the remodel for the second floor and the hearing room? And so, you know, that's something that's going to have to be very intentional and very thoughtful as we move through that process. But then also realizing that, you know, whatever we had decided as far as equipment or fixtures, you know, as it relates to the remodel, are we going to satisfy that now? So that's something that it's so new that I'm really going to have to work with other staff members to try and figure out how we get all of these pieces to kind of fit into this box of courthouse remodel. So that's actually a really great question. And I don't know that I have an answer right now, but I know that staff is working to be really thoughtful about how we approach the repairs that need done now.
I was going to ask this anyway, but it seems pretty timely now to have perhaps consideration of another week on the CIP, just to give me some time to dive into it. It's my first time through the process. And since there also might be some timing that is maybe reallocated in terms of projects just based on this damage, would that be an acceptable solution to move from, instead of November 2nd, November 9th?
Yeah, we could definitely look to place this for approval on the November 9th agenda. You know, as Commissioner Kelly mentioned, Commissioner Reed's out of town. That would just give her some additional time to review it. Back to the point about this building, I would anticipate that any damage to this building will be covered by insurance and that claim. So I really do not envision that we will need to reallocate funds out of the CIP and what's planned for 23 because of the damage that's happened here. But I do appreciate that consideration. And that's why we have contingency funds. So that's why we do have the CIP and the CRP contingency funds plan. If something were to happen, we would be able to access that. But I don't anticipate needing to change the CIP because of what's happened here today. That's my hope.
I was thinking more in terms of if it would to change the timing of when the courthouse remodel pieces might happen in the CIP process.
Yeah, I mean, really the hearing room was slated to be done and needs to be done if we move to a 5-member commission. Because it would be a reorientation of the entire room to fit in an additional 2 commissioners. So I think we're still waiting until after November to get that information, and then we would move on that piece. We still have to talk through the timing of when that would happen. I don't know that we will have the room done anyway by the time we would have new commissioners on board, potentially with how projects are moving at this point in time. But I appreciate the questions, and I think those are definitely things that we're going to be taking into consideration.
I think it's also fair to get that piece of information that there could be a commission room remodel that is contingent on that vote. I think that's something that maybe ought to be out in the public a little bit more instead of surprising people with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That, that would definitely, that would be the reason for the project. We would not need to renovate or remodel that space if we do not move to a 5-member commission.
Thank you. Brooke, one question about the maintenance building for the fairgrounds. Is that a new building? Is there a building there that serves that purpose now that's coming down? Or is this an entirely new building, and where will it go?
Yeah, that would be a completely new building. I would defer to Jimmy to answer questions about the existing structure. I think there's an existing structure out there. Jimmy, would you be able to offer any additional information?
Yes, I can. We currently have a small office building out there that has a little break room in it that the guys use to meet each morning. The maintenance building, as I call it, is a 1950s or 1960s era military style building that's along the south property line that I have some serious concerns about the safety safety risk it poses because of electrical, the date of the electrical and stuff in there. And also because of the fact we are currently utilizing it to store equipment, from mowing equipment to welding equipment to everything that we do to operate in a space that is about 1/3 of the size of what we need. And so, and also it was built and put to that use at a time when we didn't serve the amount of properties, the number of properties, the space that we currently serve. And so it's like taking a can opener to it each morning just to get our equipment out to use it. And we're really needing a space that better fits today's activities that we're doing as a maintenance department.
I would also add that project has been talked about off and on over the last several years, even as an extension of the fairgrounds work that we completed in 2017.
16 or 17, yes.
Yeah, so we had envisioned that we would need additional space at that time, and it's important to get it on the CIP for additional discussion.
Thanks for that. I'll ask one more question and then pitch it back to Commissioner Kelly for his. It's about the 1242 or 1422 Massachusetts Street, the old Public Works building, formerly church. And I know that this at some point went before the Historic Resources Commission, and it was decided that the county commission could not demolish that building and start over. Can you talk about that a little bit more, and if there any ways to like bring that back in front of the public and what the cost is of retaining that structure with what historic value it may or may not have versus a new structure there, and what that could mean for the taxpayers?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, it is 1242 Massachusetts, where the building's at. The Historic Resources Commission said that the south portion, the old sanctuary part, had historic value, but the north portion did not. And so the county at that point in time, the conversations around the courthouse, the Judicial Law Enforcement Center remodel became more prevalent. And I've not brought that back before the commission to have discussion about that space. But what I would say that we discussed at the time when the project was reviewed by the HRC, it's very difficult to find real estate on Massachusetts Street, and it is in proximity to a number of county services. At this point in time, it's been the recommendation of staff that we retain that building, and that the analysis that we had performed by Marland Construction indicated that at that time, so it was a number of years back, that it would be approximately around $3 million to either replace or repair that structure. Given its location and how advantageous it is to our work here, I believe that at some point in time, we're going to need to discuss renovating that structure and determining its use. What I can tell you from a space needs perspective, the remodel on the courthouse is not going to be enough long-term to meet all of our space needs. In addition to that, now the county is in lease space at 1006 New Hampshire. I have a strong bent towards not paying for lease space and for investing in property that we own. So I do think that conversations about how we use 1242 Massachusetts will become a part of the design work that's happening on the Judicial and Law Enforcement Center. And I've talked to Jay about that. And I know that that's one of the things that we'll be working with the architect as we verify that space needs assessment and really determine what our space needs are here downtown and what would best fit over there at 1242. And then I do think it's a conversation the commission needs to have in terms of the timing of that project, what would be needed and required. At this point in time, I just think we're going to have to talk about the courthouse first. The new courthouse, as I call it the courthouse, but the law enforcement center, and we're going to have to talk about that first. And then we'll have to come back and talk about how we want to handle 1242 Mass.
And that 1242 Mass conversation looks like, just looking at the numbers, design work probably 2023 or conversations 2023 for a possible 25-26 building project. Is that right?
Yeah, I think by then we will have the results of the initial design and space needs work from the law enforcement center. And then we know what we would need to do there. But obviously, and I think that was a point I wanted to make on the CIP and just, in a 5-year CIP, projects move. And they move every year. So that's important to remember in this conversation. Where we've slated a project will move every year, and not just because the years moved forward. That is true for conversations about the Douglas County Correctional Facility. It's true about 1242 Massachusetts. We will evaluate this frequently and determine where a project needs to be, and priorities do change and evolve. So right now, I think that's a good place for it, but that could certainly change.
Thank you. I'll save my other questions for Brooke later this week.
Thanks, Commissioner Willie. This is Commissioner Kelly. Just a couple of questions. First, probably for Brooke, if I go buy a pickup truck or any other vehicle and I, take out a loan on it, they tell me I can pay cash at any time and not have to pay all the interest. And yet we're paying $100,000 every year on the fire station. Can you walk me through why we have the money in our CIP. Why would we just not pay it all off?
So I want to answer that for Brooke. That is because we're in an interlocal agreement with the city of Lawrence related to that project and the debt service they have on the project. Their debt service, the city issued debt for that project, and it is included in their debt load and project is pretty substantial there at the city. It's related to all their other utilities work. So the amount of that debt changes from year to year, depending on how the interest rates are going on some cases. So, and they are not intending to pay the project off early. So that makes it difficult for us to have funds and pay that part of the project off early. Does that make sense?
Well, it sort of makes sense. I mean, it does seem like we're paying a little bit of the interest on the loan on behalf of the city because they do budgeting a little different than we do. So, but if that's what our interlocal agreement says, that's what we agreed to. So,
and I would just say, Commissioner Kelly, I haven't visited with the city manager about that recently. So it is something that I can add to my list of things to discuss with him about, if there's some possibilities as we approach the end of that debt, to just have the county pay their portion off.
Yeah, I just like to save the interest on that since we do it a little differently. So. This next one might be for Jimmy. So there's a lot of HVAC projects in here. One that was surprising to me was the elections office because we just purchased that building. Maybe first talk about, or we leased that building.
Right.
And if we're leasing that building, then good. See, I was afraid we were purchasing. If we lease that building, can walk me through why we're replacing the AC on that, the HVAC on that?
Well, that's a good question. And when I started here about a year and a half ago, the first thing I did was do an assessment on all the facilities that we had, and quickly came to my attention that the HVAC equipment on that building was in really, really dire shape. I mean, it was in bad condition. So I reached out to the building owner And he quickly pointed out to me that the agreement, the lease that the county had signed with them made the county responsible for all the mechanical systems. That lease was signed prior to the time that I started, and I'm not sure who or how that all went down, but it looks like it's pretty binding and that we are stuck with that agreement. And so because of that, we have that building leased at least for the next 5 years by the agreement. And in my opinion, and the opinion of my HVAC staff, the equipment there is not going to last 5 years. We are holding things together with duct tape and baling wire at this time. And so the reason I asked Brooke to put that on the CIP was because it's not going to be cheaper in 3 years or 5 years than it is now. And we might as well get it replaced if it is truly our responsibility. Does that answer your question?
It does. I don't always like the answers, but it does answer my question. Yeah.
I don't like the answer either.
Yeah, but I get it. And then since we have so many HVAC projects, some of these, Public Works, how long has that system been in place? I mean, our Public Works building isn't that old, and
Right.
yet we're looking to replace the HVAC system.
Right. And the system that was put in, and I believe when the building opened was 2015. Is that right, Chad? Somewhere in that area.
That's right.
Yeah, there were some choices made to go with what they call a VRF system. It's a more energy efficient system and the latest and the greatest. However, it is proven not only in that facility, but in multiple facilities that I've been responsible for, that it's a very difficult system to maintain. It's very expensive to maintain, and failures are fairly common on it. So just this year alone, we've probably put, I'd say $25,000 to $35,000 into making repairs to that system. And from what I understand from my staff who's been here before I started, that this is a common occurrence. It's a very specialized system that is only certain companies can work on it, and they know that, and so they charge you accordingly. So what we're wanting to do is to cut our losses, go through, replace it with a system that we can work on in-house or with contractors that are a little easier on the bills when they send them in after a project.
Well, I'm just familiar enough with VRF systems in the school district, which we have switched over to all of those to be dangerous. So I won't pretend to have any technical knowledge there, but I understand what you're saying. Has there been any? I mean, a little bit of my worry is so many HVAC systems coming online at the same time.
Sure.
And knowing that they can, these systems have a shelf life, and then we need to replace them again. Has there been any consideration to looking at all of these projects, working with a contractor on all of these projects as a whole, and how we might pace them out so that we're not having to, I mean, this is a lot of money for HVAC systems. And so how might we pace that out? Has that been considered?
We haven't taken that to that extreme, I believe, at this point. We have looked, when I did my assessment early on, one of the things I started here within the department too is trying to build a program of more of a predictive maintenance as opposed to just responding to emergencies. And so this is my kind of my first step into that, is looking at the age of the units, the type of refrigerant that is used in some of the equipment, because we can no longer purchase, because of the EPA regulations. There are some things we can't even really work on because we can't obtain R22, for example, which is a very popular refrigerant, but we can't get it to work on things. So some of these pieces that you see on there now can be and maybe should be pushed back, a year or two. We were just wanting to get them on the CIP, and maybe obviously the one at the elections office, I wouldn't want to try to push farther than another year or 18 months. But the equipment at the criminal justice building in North Lawrence, that could be a 26 or 2027 change out if needed. So we could stagger these. Like I said, this was just to get them on the plan for now.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that Sarah sort of referenced that earlier, that, this is just getting it in the budget.
Right.
Just a reminder for any of the public watching, all of these projects will come back. Just because they're budgeted doesn't mean they're purchased and we move ahead, right? All of these projects come back to the commission. So I appreciate that. Sarah, you were going to say something?
Yeah, in addition to that, this is a 5-year plan, so not all of these projects will hit in 1 year. In addition to that, this isn't that, given what you're really seeing here is a 5-year plan on facilities for the first time. In my experience here over the last several years, this is how we've approached a number of projects. These are pretty spaced out, and we have made improvements similar to other county facilities over the last 5 years in terms of how those things have gone. So I do think Jimmy has identified some issues in some buildings that we hadn't thought of, or that had not risen to our radar yet, but we've made significant improvements also to the Human Services building. There's a complete boiler chiller replacement in this building. Several years back, there was I believe a chiller replacement in the Judicial and Law Enforcement Center, a couple years back. So we have been trying to, what we do, that has been our practice, is to make those improvements over time. They just probably haven't been represented on this document in that manner. I'd also say that in terms of the Judicial and Law Enforcement Center and improvements there, both the elevator and HVAC improvements, if we go through a major expansion and renovation of that building, like we did with the correctional facility, we will probably loop those projects into that. And while we're already disrupting everything, we will replace the elevator and those systems as well. And those projects might get looped into that.
Thanks. I'm recognizing that we're 9 minutes till 5 o'clock and Mr. Voigt hasn't even started on road and bridges, so I'll hold the rest of my questions.
Well, it actually has me thinking, I wonder if I really want Chad to have a full opportunity to present that stuff and for us to spend a lot of time on roads and bridges. And I wonder if perhaps we could do that next week at the 5:30 meeting, Chad, if you're available, and we could.
Honestly, I think I could get through in 10 minutes what I've got for you. I was leaving a lot of space for questions, so
Okay, all right.
maybe I just roll it out there and then it's in the public's hands and
we can continue to talk if we need to. Go ahead.
okay. And on the on this building, on the HVAC, I wanted to add, I was around for that process too, and that was a construction manager at risk process, which is kind of like design build, and we got in here for a pretty low number. And we have a lot of really great space here. And I think that the downside of that is we kind of lowballed some things. And that system, it's not only a tricky system that I've heard, but it's also a version of that system that's already out of date. And so just to throw that in there, I think there were some savings that now we're seeing the other side of. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll say that, see if I get this right here. Okay, can you see that document? Okay.
Yes.
Up until a couple hours ago in your packet, you had one page from us. It was a table that's been replaced in the last couple hours, and now you've got a 56-page document. So I apologize for taking so long to make that replacement. This is our part of the capital improvement plan. And this document will be the one that comes to you in the packet when we do go for approval of the CIP. So this is a complete and ready to go recommendation from us. This table here, I'm not going to cover. It's a format we've always done in the years I've been here. So I wanted to include that just as a point of reference. It's our cash flow and expenditures kind of in a big snapshot. I want to look at this though. This is there's kind of a story here, and Brooke talked a little bit about the funding balances and how they progress over time versus how we spend money, and the fact that we're cash funded. And I put this together just for the road and bridge projects with a little more detail. We've got a lot of outside funding. The orange parts of the bars are the outside funding. That could be KDOT money. It could be a local partner like cities. It could be grants from federal government. So we do have quite a bit of additional funding that comes in. The green is the the county commission's annual allocation that we've received. You can see a little bit of fluctuation there. We've had years in the past that were higher. And then the orange going negative is our expenditures. And then the green line at the top is our fund balance for just road and bridge projects in the CIP. And obviously, our balance is creeping up and our expenditures are all over the place. There's a benefit to being able to do this way. You know, we can respond to things like this year when we had to reject bids and push projects back just based on the economy and the way that things are panning out. So next year in 2023, you can see that biggest expenditure bar, and that's $12 million. And I think that's realistic. We've already got bids in place for 7 million of that, and we still have 3 more bridges that we want to bid, plus some additional ongoing expense through the year. So we're definitely going to spend a lot of money next year. And then I want to point out the 2 kind of big bars to the right here include the Wakarusa Drive project. I broke the CIP this year into 2 pieces on road and bridge, and I started with bridge. This is our bridge maintenance and replacement plan portion of this. I've got some narrative here that you can refer back to that's kind of the basics of you know, information about our system and then how we prioritize projects. And then I wanted to jump right into this. This is something that we're kind of putting together this year for the first time, where we're doing our own internal scoring. And the reason for that is that the national standards have changed how they score bridge inspections, and then the numbers that we're using to prioritize projects kind of shifted out from under our feet a little bit, and bridges that we thought we were maybe looking at replacing in 5 years, suddenly maybe we shouldn't. So we dug into the details and really kind of came up with our own format for this. And it's got more emphasis. The one area that's got more emphasis is on making sure that our major routes that are emergency service routes get bridges first, in terms of, if you're going to lose that bridge in 10 years, let's get it replaced. So we want to keep that level of route open as a first priority. Then there are sort of the connecting routes that are a second priority, and then all of local roads are the next priority. We've got a lot of bridges on township roads that are rock roads that carry 50 vehicles a day. We want to keep those bridges in good shape, but they are clearly not as high a priority. This table continues on for 3 pages after this. I've included all 158 bridges in our inventory in the scoring system that we've got here. As you look at this, this bridge number right here is our local identifier. And so at the top there, we've got 2058 1500 is the name of that bridge. That's located on E1500 Road at 2058 North. So it's up in Grant Township, and that would be the lowest scoring bridge in the county. It's already in our design process, and we want to put out a bid next year for construction the following year. So as you go down through, you can see, based on the scoring and based on the information that led to that scoring, and then the bridge numbers, and then our replacement plans. So that's kind of a full disclosure on how we got to why are we working on certain bridges. And then you can go down through all of those for those pages, and you get to the bottom. And then this is our full list for the 2023 CIP for bridge replacements for the years ahead. Then moving on to the other piece of our CIP, road improvement projects. And I've just kind of restated some goals that we've shared in the past, and then hit on highlights of our major road projects, kind of giving a narrative of, you know, why they're on the list, where they came from, and when we anticipate getting the work done. And then after that, another list, which is the remaining projects in our CIP. These are the road projects, and that completes out all of the work that we intend to do. And then, as we've done in the past, we generated a detailed project list, like similar to the one that Brooke shared. So that's in the document too. And we roll right down through the projects, starting with completed projects, looking back at what we've accomplished. This is like Vinland Curve, 2 bridges that were replaced. Both of them were very similar, and the new bridges are precast concrete arch, which we're really pleased with. So we're happy with that project. Bridge maintenance projects that we've done. This is the Wakarusa River Bridge project that we completed last year. This is another bridge that we're proud of. This was actually a culvert before, and it was undersized, so it was scouring really badly, and the yellow jackets down in the hole there, Keith is one of those. And we were down there inspecting the footings, and that structure was being undermined by the high flows that were occurring. So a wider bridge was necessary. So we went in that case from a culvert to a bridge. So you may notice that last year we had 157 bridges. Now we have 158. This is our new bridge. All right, so you can, on your own time, look through several more of these. And I'm going to roll right down through the bridges. You can see that bridges are a big portion of what we focus on. If we lose a bridge, we have to close the road. So, you know, those are a huge investment, and there's obviously a huge safety concern with those. All right, now I've gotten into road projects. This is Haskell Extended South, and this is another project that was completed. In all of these summary sheets, you can see the accounting, the total costs, when they were completed, and then obviously a couple of pictures. I've included culvert replacements on the roadside just to distinguish that they're not bridges. They tend to be more road safety oriented. In this case, you can see a culvert got replaced and we've got much more clearance on the side of the road, and that's really the main point there. I'm going to let you folks, you know, look through this when there's more time available, but right here, this is our next project in terms of schedule to get it done. And we just opened bids yesterday on this, and we were really pleased with those. The estimate was $3.5 million. It came in at $3 million, and we had bids at 3.2, 3.3, and 3.6. So competitive, in the ballpark of what we expected, and a good bid. So that's good news. We'll put that on the agenda for approval for next week to award that contract, and then we'll be rolling. So that's part of the $7 million that I referenced that we've already got online for next year. This project, by the way, is Route 458, which is N1000 road between E1500 and E1600. It's where the fire was the other day. A large culvert replacement project we got included in there. You've seen this in the past. Obviously the Wakarusa project is in there too, and we're still showing city participation in this. We will need to cover that issue. If the city decides they do not want to participate in the road construction part of this, then the answer to that question is that we would probably take the bridge replacement schedule, insert one off year, and basically have a bye year and push back 1 year. We're doing about 2 or 3 bridge replacements a year in this plan. So by delaying 2, we basically cover the gap on funding. So if that's necessary, then that's the approach that we would recommend. We've got some low water crossings in the county that have kind of been sat just like this for many, many years. And the thing that is a concern to me is that, you know, as we improve these other roads, driver expectations are shifting. When you have younger drivers that have seen mostly roads with shoulders and a lot of signage and a lot of safe conditions, they're not like we were when we were kids, and they're coming up on something like this, and they may be a lot more surprised than we were. So with that kind of in mind, we want to start addressing some of these low water crossings and improving them, making them more safe. More culvert replacements. This is on Route 1061, where we intend to do some major improvements over many years. That's probably our heaviest traveled route that has not had improvements. So we've already begun, and we're going to continue focusing on Route 1061. The development pressure that may be coming around Eudora is only going to make that more of a priority. More 1061 culverts. This is actually way south down at the county line. We still have funding in there for annual projects. This is annual culvert replacements. Those are county crews in the pictures, and that's been a great source of continual funding for a lot of different kind of smaller projects, and it gives us the flexibility to push bids around and for materials and cover those gaps. Then annual rock road stabilization kind of has you know, been an ongoing thing, not a lot of dollars there. And then a couple of contingency funds that you've seen in the past. So that's the end of the detailed project list. I also put in here this output that I've got. And by the way, this is all in a database, so we can crunch the numbers a lot of different ways and produce, you know, summary tables. In this case, this is CIP project schedule by construction cost. So, you know, looking just at the cost of the construction for each year, totaling it up. And the reason I initially did this was to start thinking about our inspection load. We do a lot of inspection in-house on these projects, and if we've got $12 million next year. We were very concerned about how we're going to cover that. But you can see when you get down to 2023, well, 2022, 304,000, we haven't done much this year. So we've been doing other things to make up and use that time. Next year, we've got 10.6 million in actual construction that we're going to try to cover. So that information is all that's available in the packet, and we can talk about details. It's available publicly. We've got our biannual bridge inspection report that we received from a consulting engineer that we could share with folks if they're interested. So that's where we stand on things.
Thank you, Chad. I really appreciate this report. It's just great. And same thing, Brooke, and in your group. I love having the pictures so that the public can sort of visualize what we're talking about, especially like those parking lots. It's great to see pictures that really helps, and that each project is isolated and shows where it is in the system. So really appreciate all the county's work. Commissioner Willie, do you have any questions for this group?
Sure. Actually, I had a constituent reach out just recently about a low water crossing. So I was going to ask if those are indeed part of the road and bridge work that comes under the county, because I know those are township roads, but the bridges are county. So the low water crossing that she was asking about was on North 100 Road, just east of 650 Road, East 650. So I'll give it a drive by. If there's anything we need to talk about, we can. I also wanted to ask about, as you're replacing bridges, and some of these are more, box culverts and such, is there a minimum width that you're looking for that kind of takes into consideration like the size of farm equipment and combines, the width of those? Because some of the farm equipment can't pass over and around the bridges or culverts that we have. And yet it's expensive to make every one of those a certain width. How do you balance that?
Yeah, a lot of our older culverts are, not even 2 lanes wide. We don't do anything less than 24 feet on a township road. Anything that's paved is going to be at least 28 feet. So we do follow national standards, and the widths that we're providing would easily provide for farm use, definitely.
Well, what about on township roads? Because that's where we see the issue where you have to reroute based on what the width of the culverts would be.
Right. The answer is the same. We don't distinguish if it's a bridge, then on a township road, we treat it the same way, because that road may someday improve, may widen, may pave. You don't want to have to replace the bridge just because you made a decision to modify the road. So we're always kind of looking at what's the ultimate condition and let's build to that. And, one thing that we talk about a lot is in the 70s, we replaced 50 bridges. And while that was an amazing amount of work to get done, a lot of those bridges are now falling apart and they don't last as well as the ones that were built in the 30s. So that's an issue. And our hope is with current KDOT standards and the bridges that we're building that we've got 100-year bridges here. So when we say we want to build it for a future road width, we're looking at it that way.
I assume you also keep a contingency fund for just damage to roads, like we had the fire on East 1100 Road on the paved section of that Highway 460. Do you have a fund that goes to automatically?
That damage was pretty minimal. If it had been even a lot of damage, our road and bridge budget probably would cover that. We've got a paving machine and a crew that can do that out of the road and bridge budget. We'd probably call that more maintenance. If we got to the point where it was big and a capital improvement kind of issue, that's another great thing about a cash funded CIP is that we're able to adjust. We can cover something like that if it happens. If we had more time, one of our bridges is on the list. It wasn't on the list last year. The reason is the wing wall fell off and we're losing the road. So, we're able to adjust to situations like that in a cash funded CIP, and that's a great thing.
Thanks, Chad. I'm glad to spend a little more time with this, and we'll get to talk about it again at the public meeting.
Great, thank you.
I only have one further question, and maybe for Chad or whomever. The Wakarusa extension is in this, and we had a really great meeting out at the former Wakarusa Valley School, and appreciate everybody who came out to talk to us or talk to each other really more about that. Sarah or Chad, do we have any artifacts from that meeting that we can share with the public yet?
I know we did collect all the feedback that was presented at the meeting and developed a list of questions. I'm in the process of, we're reviewing the responses to those questions, and I've been delayed in getting that information out to back and forth to Chad and myself, and we will look to share that information on our website, on the part of our website that we have dedicated to the project, and then we'll also communicate with commissioners so that you can share that information as well. As we look forward to making these decisions. Does that kind of answer what you were looking for there, Commissioner?
Yeah, that does. And can you give us a bit of an update? We talked at, actually, I think it was just a week ago, maybe, we talked about, you know, getting some clarity from the city on their involvement in the project. I know you've been working on that communication, just so that the public hears where we're at on that. Can you share that?
Yes, last week, the commission directed the chair to send a letter to the Lawrence City Commission asking them to clarify their position on the Wakarusa Drive extension. Chad and I have a draft. We've been really busy getting ready for this session today, and there's been a few other things pop up, but my hope is that we will have that draft letter for the chair when she returns back to town, and that we can get that letter off soon.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Willie, any other questions?
I will have plenty. I'd like to spend more time with it and probably circle back with staff, probably all the staff you see present, and then bring kind of the questions that still rise to the level of public comment or the public meeting the next time we see this. So I'm excited to spend some time with it.
Okay, well, if there's no other, oh, yes, Sarah.
Well, and just to clarify, so I think at this point in time, we will plan on putting this on the November 9th business session agenda. So that'll give us plenty of time to answer some of those questions and to add some additional materials to the packet. And so the next opportunity for us to discuss will be the 9th.
Sounds great. Okay, we're a little bit over time, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll recess until 5:30 for our regular business meeting. And until then, we are adjourned.
Thank you.